Okay, May 21st, 2022, we went over the PRI or evaluation, starting with the postural respiration examination and cervical revolution examination. And then we discerned a couple of key points and takeaways that were going to help us to better refine our assessment. So we jotted down the notes just here. So we have using the phone rather than the goniometer for the upper extremity assessments, specifically for glenohumeral internal rotation and horizontal abduction. We talked about compensated versus uncompensated positioning and how people are able to work within their patterns or make compensations for said patterns that they're in. We also talked about connective tissue quality and that versus tight muscles. Examples are with increased tension between resistance 1 and resistance 2, escalators versus elevators, as far as how much resistance is felt between those 2 points and how deep into the range R1 comes on. Examples of this would be with the overhead flexion test of the glenohumeral joint, horizontal abduction with the pectoralis tissue, and then we also talked about the algorithmic testing and that there's standardized tests within the PRI algorithm. For example, the asterisk ones are things that are consistently done, where you have the glenohumeral joint internal rotation and horizontal abduction and the apical expansion. Also, these standardized and or accessory tests can also be thought of as primary and secondary or tertiary tests. And the secondary and tertiary tests would be done depending on the context and the findings of the primary tests. We also talked about overhead flexion of the glenohumeral joint, and that having the person maximally exhale will change the range of motion or value that we get overhead. So an example would be, I got for myself, my right glenohumeral joint flexion was 165 with maximal exhalation maximal exhalation versus when I inhaled or was in a resting neutral position, the mid-axillary line changed and thus did the measurement, and it was only about 150. So that's important. And then stabilization of the coracoid process during glenohumeral joint internal rotation. So coming in over the coracoid with a C grip, where my thumb is on the coracoid and I'm wrapped around the back of the shoulder, will give me a better understanding as to the stabilization of the scapula as I move the glenohumeral joint into internal rotation. We also talked about the importance of taking all glenohumeral joint measurements with the knees flexed in a crook-lying position with the person in supine. And then we also refine the apical expansion tests with using rib cage expansion. We took a video of that. All right, and that's the summary of today's takeaway for PRI assessment and learning.